Hello, my true crime lovelies. How are you? I hope you are well. I hope you are as lovely in life as you are in my mind. All right, Little Miss Side Part is a bunch of new charges. That's right, Kouri Richins. As if murdering your husband is not enough. Like, she is, my grandma used to say, don't be a liar or a thief. Those are the worst things you can be. I think because I was a child, because I'm pretty sure being a murderer is pretty bad. But listen, Corey's covering all the bases. She wants to be the worst of the worst because she's lying and thieving. We're going to get into it, but first I'm going to thank the members and run the intro. I will see you on the other side. Thank you, members. I appreciate you. And if you're here watching, I appreciate you too. Thanks for being here with me. All right, just a little quick background. Kouri Richins is accused of murdering her husband, Eric Richins, in March of 2022. She tried in February on Valentine's Day, left him a little poison sandwich while she was off with her. What is that called? I guess just her lover. That doesn't sound explicit enough. She was having an affair. She was having an affair. She was off with that. It didn't work. And so she tried again, being the trooper that she is. If at first you don't succeed, try again. She tried the next month and unfortunately was successful. She's got 3 children with this man. She was in over her head financially, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. There's a lot, so I wrote them down. She has 5 counts of mortgage fraud. She's 5 counts of forgery, 7 counts of issuing bad checks. That's right, honey. She had checks bouncing all over town. Money laundering, 7 counts. Still ain't clean. And then she's got communications fraud and a pattern of unlawful activity. I would say that is an understatement if these allegations are true. So she married her husband. Well, she met him she was working at Home Depot. He had a business that required him to frequent Home Depot. She met him there. Everybody thought they were a cute couple. I think she saw his pocketbook and was like, oh yeah, because she got pregnant shortly after they met, and then they got married the year after that. They signed a premarital agreement so that what's his stayed his. He had been married before. Unfortunately, that wife, they had been divorced, but that wife died in an accident, if I'm remembering correctly. But he wanted to shore things up, and it was more than a notion, honey. It was more than a notion, because if there was ever a woman that needed that, it was this one. But oh no, she would not be deterred. She was determined to get her hands, her little grubby hands on his money. Let's get into the charges, okay? Oh, it's it's rough. It's sad. 3 kids are without their father because of this woman's greed. And she has that annoying side part. Like, I think after there's a certain age where we should not have a deep, and it's not just that it's the part, because I have a side part, but it's the part and the whole slick down swoop that she has going on. But hey, Kouri, you do you, honey. I'm gonna read to you guys. I'm gonna show you guys this little PowerPoint while I read through, because it's a lot of reading. I'm gonna give you the highlights, and then I'm gonna give you my 2 cents as we go along. You know how we do over here. It's sad. It really is sad that these kids are without their dad, because he sounded like a really dedicated, committed dad, all for greed. Well, and that's my opinion. You guys let me know what you think, but it makes no sense at all. Okay. So, defendant met Eric Richins in 2009 while she was working as a cashier at Home Depot. They had a child in 2012 and married in 2013. In my opinion, that baby was not an accident. That was planned by Kouri. I'm just saying. At the time of the marriage, Eric Richins and his business partner owned a successful stone masonry business called C&E Stone Masonry. That was the business that required him to go to Home Depot frequently. Everybody at the Home Depot knew who Eric was. And there's one like older cashier. I don't know if she's a manager, but I've seen a couple interviews with her, and they were excited that Kouri and Eric were hitting it off. They thought it was going to be a match made in heaven. Little did they know. Run, Eric, run. So their premarital agreement meant that the business was going to be his even after marriage, right? She was going to own no part in it. He had a partner in there, like a business partner. They owned it together, and it was going to be his if in the event of their divorce. The only way that she would have any ownership, there were two conditions. One, he had to die. Two, they had to still be married, right? So if they divorce, she gets nothing. If he's alive, she gets nothing. So it had to be those two things. So she didn't want to be in a situation where he divorced her because she would get nothing if she were up to no good, right? So she has no claims to that, no partnership interest. In early 2019, the defendant used a power of attorney to obtain a $250,000 home equity line of credit, or HELOC. Very familiar with these. When I was a compliance auditor, I had to look at many HELOC applications. And anyway, so she did it without his consent, right? She didn't have this power of attorney. Mind you, this house was his, free and clear. Well, he had a mortgage on it, but it had nothing to do with her. It was a premarital asset. Had they gotten divorced, that also stayed with him, right? So she's digging into stuff that's not even hers. It's not like she was like borrowing this money on a home that she partially owned. It was all his. So balls of a burglar, sleeping in the same house with him, and taking out this home equity line of credit, which what did she need it for? Oh, she wanted to start a real estate business. So she opened up K. Richins Realty with the money that she stole, basically. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. So, and this realty company was for the purpose of selling and buying real estate. Now, I'm going to use that loosely. That's what she wrote down as the purpose. But really what it ended up is she kept buying real estate. Not so good at selling, really good at buying with money she did not have. So she was the sole member of the company. And yeah, she used that and hard money loans to finance its ongoing operation. She had no capital for it, which is weird because you would think if you were going to steal, I'm not saying do any crimes. We here at Tanika's 2 cents, what is our motto? Don't do crimes. But at least if you were going to steal it, have a plan, one, to pay the money back, but two, to make the business profitable, right? But not her. She went to hard money loans. So hard money loans, high interest, and they are collateralized, right? So if you don't pay the high interest, they come in to get your stuff, girl. Eric Richins first learned of the HELOC in October of 2020. So she did it in early 2019. He learned in the latter part of 2019. They had been married. So when she took out the HELOC, they had been married 6 years. When he found out about it, that was 7 years. Eric, I do not mean to shame any victims. That is never my intent. But that was the 7-year itch of like, not an itch of wanting to sleep with someone else, but the itch like, ooh, maybe I married somebody crazy. And that was the sign to get out. He knew something was wrong. He took steps to protect himself. But as we often see, he like removed her name from things, but he didn't tell her that she was not going to get the money. Remember Nancy Joe and the Charles Vallow case when Lori was on trial and she suggested, why don't you tell her you removed her as a beneficiary? Nancy would have given the same advice to Eric because I think this may have ended up differently. But let me give you the details. So he learned of it in October 2020. The secret origination and the existence of the HELOC was a source of tension between Eric and Kouri, right? And why wouldn't it be? Girl, you didn't steal money from me, like, and you sleeping in the same bed next to me every single night to the tune of $250,000. Like, that's not pocket change. Like, you didn't get that out the couch cushions. You know what I'm saying? So, of course, there was tension. She told him that she was going to pay him back, and she led him to believe that she had already paid him back. Why he didn't call the bank, I don't know. But she had not repaid him. In fact, at the time of his death, which would be in 2022, March 2022. It was still not paid off. But at the end of 2020, she's like, oh, I got you. I paid it off. I paid it off. So on October 13th, now mind you, he didn't find out about the HELOC until October, so it had to be pretty early because here we are, we're not even at halfway through October, and he's consulting an estate planning lawyer. Good on him. He informed his lawyer he wanted to protect himself in the short term from recently discovered and ongoing abuse and misuse of his finances by his wife, and also to protect his 3 children in the long term, right? Ensuring that the defendant would not be able to ever manage his property after his death. So he's locking it up for the kids because obviously she's not responsible financially. And if she'll steal from her husband, she'll steal from her kids. Like he's got 3 boys. He wants 3 boys, 3 girls. I'm not saying boy specific. He in fact had 3 boys, but he wanted his children to be able to go to college, have, pay for their wedding, the things that you do when you're able. And it seems like the mama, she didn't care. So he had to think for everybody. So on November 3rd, he executed several estate planning instruments, including healthcare directive, durable power of attorney, the thing that she pretended she had when she got the HELOC. He got an actual one. Pour over will. Now, I wasn't familiar with the pour over will, so I let my Google fingers do the walking. This is what I found out, and it makes sense. Pour over will is a legal document used in conjunction with the revocable living trust. So, how you create a trust, you can't put everything in there when you're still alive because you want to have access to some of it, right? Like, for example, if you wanted something to stay liquid, you don't want it necessarily in the trust. You don't want to have to worry about all the implications, ramifications of it being in a trust versus it not being. So the pour over will is designed to handle those assets that are not transferred into the living trust while the individual is alive. And then it ensures that once that person dies, those assets are also distributed according to the trust instructions, right? So it's just like a neat, like I have these while I'm alive and my stuff in my trust is over here. My revocable living trust is over here. When I die, everything that I was using while I was alive goes over to the revocable living trust and falls under the rules of that trust. So he had money to kick it. And then when he kicked the dust, unfortunately, it went over there for the benefit of his sons and his sister, Kate Richins, he made his agent, fiduciary, or trustee to the intentional and purposeful exclusion of Kouri, right? He did this so she couldn't touch his shite. He also created the Eric Richins Living Trust, which is the trust that the pour over will was meant to pour over into. So in the 5 months prior to Eric's death, K. Richins Realty realized $170,000 in revenue, while its monthly debt service exceeded $250,000. So I know what you're wondering. Well, what does that mean? That means every month she lost $80,000, right? She was operating at a loss of $80,000. So, I did the math for you. The $80,000 over a 12-month period would be $960,000. So almost $1 million operating loss annually for her company. She is in the hole. If this hole gets any deeper, she might be in China. So does she stop there? Does she say, oh, wait, I have these properties. Let me sell some properties so that I can have some income, right? So that I can increase cash flow. No, she doesn't. Despite her existing debt and insufficient revenue, the defendant continued to use hard money loans to purchase 3 additional properties. So she's already in the hole. She's like, let me dig it a little deeper. Let me get these 3 properties. And so in November 2021, she got these properties. She added $1.1 million in high interest debt to her already staggering and unserviceable debt load. Unserviceable because she doesn't have enough money coming in to cover the monthly cost of her debt, right? I've been there, I've done that. I'm not judging, but not to the tune of this type of money. I have impulse control. So anyway, I'm getting better. But so she now has added 1.1 million. By that day in November 30th is when she closed on the 3 properties. She had already defaulted on one loan and was delinquent on several others because she has no money coming in, right? She's robbing Peter to pay Paul, as we would say. It's like a little show game. Move it over here, move it over there, which is probably why she ended up with, what do we say in checks? 7 counts of bad checks. She's probably check kiting, which is a whole other thing, but trying to beat it to the bank, trying to spend the money before the check bounces because she knows she doesn't have it. Oh yeah, they those are charges. Those are charges, Kouri. You in trouble, girl, if this is true. Okay, so by the end of 2021, I love this line that whoever wrote these charges, I love how they wrote this. The defendant stood on the precipice of total financial collapse. So I can't, when they say precipice, I imagine her on the edge of something, right? But also total financial collapse, I imagine this like big, heavy burden on her back. So maybe it's both. Maybe she's on the edge of the mountain, about to fall into this bottomless pit. She's went past China at this point with this mountain of debt on her back, right? This is November 30th. She's going to make her first attempt on his life in 3 months. She is feeling that weight on her shoulders. On December 23rd, 2021, 2 days before Christmas, the defendant contracted to purchase an unfinished mansion in Midway, Utah, using $2.9 million in high interest debt due in 6 months, even though she lacked the financial ability to service the additional debt, refinance the debt, rehabilitate the property, or otherwise dispose of the property. So I want to show you this property because it's not even livable the way that she bought it. So I don't know what she was thinking. Let me see if this comes up. Here we go. This is it. If I can zoom in, it's got the exterior insulation exposed, right? Sometimes you'll see the brand that I can think of is like Tyvek. Although some of this looks like it might just be the paper. Either way, it's not livable. So it's not like she could move in or she could rent it out or anything to generate income from this property. It has to be completed. It's incomplete property. So it's this, and then there's a second property or a second structure on the property. You see that? So I read somewhere she intended to live here. This was her story. Live in this part while this part got worked on. I believe her lover. I wish there was a salacious term for men. You know how mistress is kind of like saucy? I wish there was like a male version because Mr. is not doing it because of Mr. Rogers. But whatever that is, he was a handyman. So, but this is not just a handyman kind of job. Do you know what I'm saying? My bonus dad was a general contractor. This is unique. You're going to need several vendors out here. So the 2 buildings have sat unfinished after breaking ground and piquing curiosities in 2017. And she bought these, what do we say? Or bought it in 2021, 2022 is when she closed on it, the day after she murdered her husband. So like you see here, her husband balked at the $2 million price tag. Now remember, she's already up to her eyeballs in debt, but she wants this house. No long-term plan as to how she's going to service that debt. Okay, here we go. Back to the PowerPoint. Okay. So 2.9. So we might as well say 3 million, right? And she's already carrying this $1 million debt, annual debt. That's just keeps growing because she has no money coming in, no legitimate money, right? It's all hard money loans, which is usually exorbitantly high interest rates. It's like loan shark type stuff. So you see people doing it in Vegas, like with gambling problems, or when they go to Vegas, they're getting hard money loans and they're bringing titles to properties, pink slips to the cars, as they said in Greece. Just desperate, not sound. And Eric was well situated. So I don't know if she was like competing with him because he had money and she wanted to show she could have money and be successful. I don't know what was going on, but this was completely unnecessary. It wasn't even like, oh, somebody's in the hospital sick and you have to help them out. This was just like dumb. So at the end of oh wait, I do want to say this line. She ultimately closed on the house the day after his death. She was scheduled to close on March 4th, but she didn't close till the day after his death. K. Richins Realty owed hard money lenders at least 1.8 million, and the day after Eric Richins' death, it owed them nearly 5 million, right? Because she added the 3 million, the 2.9. So at the time of Eric Richins' death, at least 3 insurance policies on Eric Richins' life existed with aggregate death benefits of 1.35 million and Kouri as the beneficiary. A 4th policy existed with a death benefit of 500,000, so half a million, which would have been 1.85 million. Still not enough to service her nearly $5 million in debt. The defendant mistakenly believes she was the beneficiary of that policy as well. A 5th policy, and she has charges of, I think one of the forgery charges, we'll go back, is related to these insurance policies. The 5th policy paid approximately 168,000 toward the balance of the mortgage, right? Which she doesn't own the house. She's not going to own the house. She doesn't know. I don't know why. Well, again, I'm not victim shaming, but when you have to change stuff around like that to keep from your spouse, get a divorce. You in danger. You in danger. Run. So, okay, at the time of his death, Eric Richins' estate was worth approximately 5 million. So she owes nearly 5 million. His estate was worth 5 million. The defendant, her family, K. Richins Realty, and C&E, which is the company that Eric owned with his business partner, they all banked at America First Credit Union. The defendant also had a personal checking account with Navy Federal, which included a $15,000 credit line. So here we get to the false bank statements. The defendant submitted a falsified bank statement to Ironbridge Financial in support of a mortgage loan on July 7th, 2021. So this is while Eric is still alive. The defendant, on behalf of her company, entered a mortgage loan with Ironbridge Financial on June 29th, 2021 in support of that application. So she got the mortgage. It was approved. She has it on July 7th. But leading up to that on June 29th, she had an application and, you have your supporting documents. She submitted a purported America First statement for her company dated May 31st, showing an account balance of $210,000, 896, so almost 211. Her actual statement shows an account balance of $15,000. So just a wee bit, about $200,000 difference. Transaction descriptions listed on the purported statement that she submitted in support of the application are identical to the transaction descriptions listed on C&E's statement. So sounds like she took a statement from C&E and made it look like it was from K. Richins, right? C&E is her husband's company. The purported statement that the defendant submitted is comprised of the header, K. Richins Realty actual statement, and the body of C&E statement, which it's pretty easy to do a cut and paste job when you guys both have the same financial institution, because it's essentially like the same template, right? You're just swapping out the name at the top. An easy cut, I'm imagining. Not that I know anything about forgery, but I know how to look for forgery and falsified documents. Compliance auditor, former. So seems like that's pretty clear cut, right? She's taking statements from her husband's company. Now, how she got them, that's a whole other thing. Cutting off the header and swapping out her company name on there to make it look like that's her statement. So she gets approved for the loan. So on July 2nd, while processing the mortgage loan, an Ironbridge representative noted to the defendant, "When I ran your credit, it was lower than I expected. Looks like there are some delinquencies with regards to a few credit cards." I was just a bit surprised by that. I know you have a lot of money in the bank to cover expenses. 3 days later, the defendant explained, I recently learned, and she's saying money in the bank because she's looking at that $210,000 balance which is on this statement, which is really to C&E, right? So, girl, why you ain't paying your credit card bills? That's what she's saying. 3 days later, the defendant explained, I recently learned, and I'm guessing this is email because why would it be 3 days later? And then she puts LOL in there, which typically you don't say lol when you're talking to someone. But 3 days later, the defendant explained, I recently learned about all of these as well, LOL. Who laughs when you have multiple delinquencies on a credit card? Like when you're talking about a financial transaction that relates to your credit. I mean, period, who laughs, but it just seems weird. And then my husband tried to explain to me this was his doing a while ago. So your husband stopped paying credit card bills, ma'am? What? We are in the process of a separation for one of many reasons, but this is one of them, to keep it short and sweet. Lol. It's been crazy to say the least, exclamation point. There's no evidence to suggest this explanation is true, is what the state writes. Okay, so the defendant submitted a false bank statement to Boomerang Finance in support of a mortgage loan application. Now, I'm not giving anybody any financial advice. That's not why I'm here on YouTube. I'm here to give you my 2 cents. But Boomerang Finance, I don't know if I would bank with them or do any financial, Boomerang. Psh, psh, psh. Like, I don't know. Is it just me? On August 4th, 2021, the defendant, on behalf of her company, entered a mortgage loan with Boomerang Finance Sub REIT, REIT. So that is, hang on, investment. It's a real estate investment something. Real estate investment trust. It's been a while. So LLC, August 2nd. So she got it on August 4th. On August 2nd, her application, what she submitted, purported to have an American First bank account that had $702,000 in it. Her actual America First statement, dated June 30th, shows an account balance of $15,000. So she's almost at $750,000, what she's showing. And ain't got a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of because it's $15,000 relative to what she's saying. C&E's America First statement, so her husband's, had the balance of, and it's down to the cent, to the penny, $702,831.96 cents. So the transaction descriptions listed also match what was on C&E. The purported statement that the defendant submitted is comprised of the header of her realty company attached to the body of C&E's statement. The defendant submitted 3 falsified bank statements to Excel Financial Services in support of a mortgage loan. So this is a similar thing. I'm not going to go through all of it, but you guys get her drift or her grift. So let's go into bad checks and laundered money. On August 8th, 2021, she was busy in the last quarter, well, the last 2 quarters of 2021. She wrote check number 271 from her Navy Federal account to her company's realty for $2,100. So this sounds like it's going to be a kite. At the time, the Navy Federal account balance was 0. So she's writing $210,000 check on an empty account. And the line of credit was, it's in brackets. I wonder if it's like parentheses. So I'll say negative $13,000. The defendant deposited the check into her business America First account. At that time, the America First account balance was $9,000, $9,000 and some change. The defendant then transferred $2,500 from the America First account to her mother and $13,000 to several creditors before America First could draw back the $2,100 before it bounced. Ooh. So money is gone, check is going in, boing, nothing is in there. It's bouncing off the bottom of an empty banking account. America First ultimately returned the check for insufficient funds. October 12th, defendant wrote check number 304 from her Navy Federal to her company for $2,500. So October 12th, so August, September, so 2 months later, doing the same thing. At the time, the Navy Federal account balance was zero and the line of credit was negative 14,952. The total line is 15,000 and she's used up the majority of it. The defendant deposited the check into her company's America First account. At that time, America First account, the balance was $505. Defendant then transferred $2,500 from the America First account to several creditors, like she's paying bills or pretending to, before America First could draw back the $2,500. So the second time she's done that to America First. November, the next month, the defendant wrote check 241. And these are not sequential. So the last one was 304. So these are all Navy Federal. 271, 304, 241. So she's not even going in order, right? Because presumably 241 you would write first, but she wrote 241 on November 11th. She wrote 304 on October 12th. She wrote 271 on August. So I don't know. She's playing some kind of game in there. On November 11th, so she wrote the 241 from her Navy Federal to her business for $3,000. The account was zero and line of credit was negative. She deposited the $3,000 into her business America First account. So from Navy Federal, good Lord. Yeah, Navy Federal to her business account for $3,000. Then she deposited from her business. No, she deposited into her business account. At the time, the business account balance was negative 2,000, right? So she's now going to have it's going to reflect about a positive of $800, even though it's not a good check. It's a rubber check. The defendant then transferred $1,000 from the America First account, which she would have only been positive 800. So she's overwriting it. Like she really could, yeah. It's going to be $200 difference. She transferred that to her mother and then $2,000 for her personal account before they could draw back the $3,000. So she knew she didn't have it covered. Then she wrote check 275 from Navy Federal to her business account for $5,000. At that time, Navy Federal was zero. Line of credit was still negative 14K. She deposited the check into her business America First account. At that time, the America First account balance was $573. So now she's got $5,573 pretend dollars in there. The defendant then transferred $1,000 from the America First to her mother and $2,000 to her personal account. Why the hell is she writing her mom these checks knowing she can't cover it? Is mom in on the scheme? Why would she be? Does she borrow money from her mom? Isn't that weird? Because this is the next day, November 11th. Oh no, she didn't. No, she did. Yeah, November 11th, she transferred money to her mom, $1,000. Then November 12th, she transferred another $1,000 to her mom. Her mom is shady to me too. I have a playlist, but her mom's lover, girlfriend, I don't think they were married, died under similar circumstances, and the mom got the money. So mom might have put Kouri up on game. If it happened, mom got away with it, but that was like pre-digital age. Kouri left such a long digital trail. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Okay, so the defendant fraudulently extracted $45,000 from her best friend. So counts 25 and 26 in her indictment. And oh my God, you ain't my best friend no more. Somebody would have to correct this in the pleading or in the indictment. In late 2021, Kay Richins owned a home located in Eber City, Heber, Eber, in Utah, on which the defendant her company, her company owned this house, and Kouri Richins owed $456,000 in 4 short-term, high-interest, hard money loans. So I guess that's spread across the 4. So maybe they were about 125,000 each, these high-interest loans. 3 of the 4 notes secured by this property matured on January 7th or 8th of 2022. Beginning in October 2021, the defendant unsuccessfully tried to refinance that property into a traditional 30-day mortgage. She planned to then seller finance the property for her best friend. The best friend, her husband, and 3 small children moved into the home. The defendant and her best friend signed a residential lease agreement with option to purchase, wherein the best friend agreed to pay defendant about $3,000 a month, $2,900 in rent, with an option to buy the home for $490,000. So she's gonna buy it for more than what Kouri owed at that time. But again, she's got these high interest loans on it, so she can't catch up. I don't know why she doesn't sell it outright, not to the best friend, and I'm air quoting friends, because girl, you ain't nobody's friend. If that's a friend, I don't need enemies. So January 11th, 2022, a month before she attempts to kill her husband for the first time, defendant's best friend caused 2 wires totaling $45,000 to transfer into the K. Richins realty account. Correspondence between the defendant and her best friend establishes that the defendant agreed to apply this money as a down payment on a long-term mortgage, supposedly closing on January 18th. So she's like, "Oh, I got the mortgage lined up. Send me this $45,000, and that'll be the down payment on that long-term mortgage, and then you continue paying me the $2,900 monthly." Immediately prior to her best friend's wires entering K. Richins' account, the account balance was negative $1,900. As soon as the first wire entered the account and before the second wire entered the account, the defendant transferred $19,299 of her best friend's down payment to her personal AFCU account to cover a wire transfer of exactly $19,299 to FundFi, an entity with which the defendant had taken out a high interest account receivable loan unrelated to that property. Robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like, it's almost like a back end Ponzi scheme, except she's not, well, it's weird. That money, as soon as it comes in, it's going immediately out, right? So what's 45 divided by the 2? She sends, I mean, it's a dance. How does she sleep at night? So $22,500 is what was transferred in, and 19 went out. Like, it didn't even get to sit in there good and get comfortable. It was like boop, boop, boop. Wow. And I bet the best friend, if she had known, maybe would have loaned it to her. But obviously, she thinks it's for housing for her husband and her children. Like, you don't mess around with people's housing. I'm sorry. Okay. So by January 19th, the defendant had spent the remainder of her best friend's $45,000 down payment on expenses unrelated. So clearly there was no mortgage, because that 45 was meant to go as a down payment on the long-term mortgage, maybe a 3rd year. And so what happened to the mortgage? Was it pretend? So we're still just in the high interest loan in this house, unbeknownst to the best friend, because she thinks she's put a down payment on. So on January 19th, K. Richins' realty account the balance was $227. The property at 100 East 100th Street refinancing did not take place in January. The defendant was forced to enter into an extension agreement with the largest of the 4 hard money lenders, which is crazy. You have 4, so you could default on 1 and you still lose the house, but pay the other 3. Like, that is just like bananas. But it tells me she did not have enough collateral to get 1. But that's weird if they're using the house as the collateral. I don't know, you in danger, girl. Why didn't she just sell it outright? Like, there are so many cash buyers. Girls, just get liquid. You know what I mean? Get some liquidity. I don't know. I don't know what's happening here. This is bad. And meanwhile, all this time, her husband is floating her unwittingly, right? Because if this was her company on her own and she had no husband, she would be homeless. Like, girl, and you damn sure wouldn't be giving your mom $1,000 a month. Whoo, this is bad. Okay, the defendant was then thus forced to enter into another extension agreement with the largest hard money lender on February 16th. The unpaid principal balance on that date, $347,000. And the extension agreement extended the repayment term to March 8th. Not even a whole month. February 16th to March 8th of 2022. And she has no income, no cash flow. Okay. Wow. So, and March 8th, which was 4 days after her husband's death, ultimately one of the defendant's lenders foreclosed on the property and evicted the defendant's best friend and her family. But she ain't that best friend no more. So then she submitted a falsified insurance application on life insurance. It was a death benefit of $100,000. She was the beneficiary. It became effective on February 4th, 10 days before her first attempt, because she tried on Valentine's Day to unalive her husband. The defendant was able to apply for the policy because of her membership in PenFed Credit Union. So this is her second, because she had Navy Federal. Somebody in her family must have been in the military, right? This is her second military required account. Eric Richins had no affiliation with PenFed. Policy premiums were deducted from K. Richins Realty America First account. So this is some Nancy Brophy stuff. You are broke AF, but you are making sure you have money to cover all these policies on your husband. Oh my God. No caveat. There's no caveat. That's just what it is. So the defendant attempted to murder Eric Richins for pecuniary gain. We've gone over that. Let's just look at some of these messages. Oh my God. Defendant occasionally employed Hayden Jeffs to assist her with renovating houses. On January 20th, 2022. Oh, so she was a flipper. She's renovating all the houses. That's why she's not selling them, even though she's overpaying for them and over leveraged. The defendant text messages Mr. Jeffs. I did want to chat with you about something super random. Not now, at Kid Stuff. I'll call you tomorrow if that works. On January 21st, 7:24, the defendant text messages Mr. Jeffs. Hey, today snuck away from me. Can I give you a call in the morning around 11:30? On January 22nd, 2022, at 11:06 a.m., the defendant text messaged Mr. Jeffs. Got a sec? Mr. Jeffs told law enforcement that he spoke with the defendant on Jan 22, 2022, and that the defendant asked him for fentanyl. That's not random. The defendant told Mr. Jeffs that she wanted the fentanyl for a client who had back pain. Mr. Jeffs told the defendant that he would not get her fentanyl, and the defendant hung up on Mr. Jeffs. On January 22nd, 5:35 p.m., after the phone call in which Mr. Jeffs declined to get fentanyl, the defendant text messaged Mr. Jeffs. Have another one for you. Call me if you get a sec. Mr. Jeffs told law enforcement that during a second phone call with the defendant on January 22nd, the defendant asked him for propofol. Mr. Jeffs told the defendant that he could not get her propofol. Mr. Jeffs, I would have went to the police. Like, girl, why are you asking me for this stuff? Do they have a pattern? I mean, was there a habit where he had, ma'am, don't lose my number. The text message from January 22nd between the defendant and Mr. Jeffs were manually deleted from the defendant's phone. After that time, the defendant and Mr. Jeffs did not communicate ever again. The defendant and Mr. Jeffs, I think he's the one who died because the other one was her lover. So I think he's mysteriously died. And there's like, I gotta find an emotion about how his testimony might come in or how what he has to say. Because usually if you're not alive and you can't be cross-examined, you can't be entered as a witness. But there was something I saw. I'll follow up with you guys though. The defendant and Mr. Jeffs had communicated regularly throughout the prior year. On May 31st, 2022, approximately 3 weeks after the defendant's arrest for the murder of Eric Richins, the defendant's mother text messaged the defendant, Mr. Jeffs running his mouth. See, the mama, I'm not a fan of the mama. The defendant occasionally employed Carmen Labor to clean houses. Miss Labor told law enforcement that sometime in early 22. Okay, I'm not going to cover this. This is when she goes over the Michael Jackson stuff. We covered that in a prior video. But phone data showed several texts between the defendant and Ms. Labor on February 11th, so a couple days before Eric's death. A certain diner in Kamas, Utah, opens daily at 7, and at 8:53 a.m. on February 14th, the defendant placed a 1-minute phone call to the diner. The defendant's and Eric Richins' joint bank account statement shows a $41.29 purchase at the diner on this day. So, they say it so nicely. 9:41, the defendant text messaged her paramour, headed that way. At 9:49, the defendant text messaged him a screenshot of a navigation application on her cell phone showing her current location on SR 32 in Kamas and her projected arrival at an unknown destination at 10:49. So she's about an hour away. At 11:09 a.m., Eric Richins placed a 2-minute phone call to the defendant. At 11:27 a.m., Eric Richins text message a photograph to the defendant. That photograph has been deleted from both the defendant's and Eric Richins' phones. At 11:33 a.m., Eric Richins text messaged the defendant, I'm going to go lay down for a bit. If I don't start getting better, I'm going to head to the hospital. 1 minute later, the defendant responded, geez, it's that bad? Need me to come home? Go to take a nap and call me when you're up. 5 minutes later, and she misspelled your. 5 minutes later at 11:39 a.m., activity recorded on Eric Richins' phone and associated devices ceased. So he's still wherever he is, or his phone is still. Activity did not resume until nearly 2 hours later at 1:32. So she's cold-blooded, because imagine if the food that she gave him did actually poison him and he's going to be passed out. She's off with her lover, getting her chitty bang banged. At 1:43, Eric Richins text messaged the defendant and asked, are you home? The defendant responded, no, in Provo, waiting for my cabinet installer guy. Are you home? At 1:45, Eric Richins responded, in the office. I've been sleeping out here. Eric Richins' office was in a freestanding structure behind his home. 1:59, Eric Richins called Cody Wright, a close friend. Mr. Wright could hear fear in Eric Richins' voice and tell that Eric Richins was scared. At 2:11, Eric Richins called John Kays, another close friend. Mr. Kays was struck by the tone of Eric Richins' voice and said that he seemed different, down, and somber. Opioids, including fentanyl, can cause allergic and pseudo-allergic reactions to include hives. Eric Richins did not have any food allergies. So maybe the photo was something of him with hives in there. The defendant and Ms. Lauber exchanged 30 text messages on Valentine's Day. 30. 2022. On June 18th, 2022, 3.5 months after Eric Richins' death. So it wasn't successful Valentine's Day, but she was successful early March in her unaliving efforts. The defendant text messaged her best friend about this incident. The defendant wrote, it was Valentine's Day and Eric and I were both working from home that day and I ordered lunch from the diner, 6 exclamation points. He never broke out in hives or used an EpiPen. I was fucking with him. He said the sandwich hurt his stomach, so he was going to take a nap. No hives, no EpiPen. Why this is coming up, I don't know, but this also makes me believe that that picture was of him with hives, and we know she's lying because she was with her paramour and not with him. On August 22nd, 2023, I wonder if she went into their iCloud to erase those pictures. Like, how did she get that? And why just that picture and not the text messages? That's what's making me think she went into the iCloud and just boop, boop, Anyway, she seems upset. And this is after he's dead. So I don't know that this amount of rage is appropriate unless she's feeling guilty. But we know she doesn't get caught until like the year later because she writes the book about grieving, uses her children's likeness and actual names, goes on morning TV wearing a jacket of which she is the only member of the people who wear the jacket. Okay, on August 22nd, 2023, nearly 4 months after the defendant was arrested for the murder of Eric Richins, the defendant discussed this incident in 2 phone calls. In a phone call with her mother, the defendant confirmed she was the person who picked up sandwiches from the diner on Valentine's Day. She said, "We ate in the office." Her text message tell the truth. In a phone call with her brother, the defendant discussed buying lunch at the diner that day. She bought it in the morning, though, right? So the defendant murdered Eric Richins for pecuniary gain, count 26. She told, I'm going to skip these actually. I'm going to go to the text messages. At 3:21 on March 4th, the defendant called Summit County Dispatch and reported that her husband, Eric Richins, was not breathing. He's cold. He doesn't have a pulse. 10 minutes later, Summit County Emergency Medical Services, EMS, personnel and Sheriff's Department arrived at Eric Richins' home. They found Eric Richins on the floor. I love that they put at Eric Richins' home and not at the Richins' home, because tell the truth and shame the devil, it is his home. They found Eric Richins on the floor at the foot of his bed and performed life-saving measures, but ultimately declared him deceased at 4:58 a.m. EMS personnel thought he'd been dead a while and noted that he was asystole the whole time. While EMS personnel were attending to Eric Richins, the defendant told law enforcement that she and Eric Richins had a drink together at 9. So this is the one where it was like Moscow mules and it ended up being lemon drops. Anyway, so went to the kitchen and both started grabbing ingredients for a Moscow mule and a lemon drop. We finished talking, made our way back to our bedroom, and brushed our teeth. A pathologist at the OME performed an autopsy on Eric Richins and concluded his immediate cause of death was drug intoxication, fentanyl. The OME determined the level of fentanyl in Eric Richins' blood was 15 ng/ml, which is approximately 5 times a lethal dose, and that his gastric fluid contained an additional, 20,000 ng/ml of fentanyl. So he had already started metabolizing that, right? It went into his, the gastric fluid is in the stomach, so it had already been processed through the stomach. So not yet in the blood because the body was still processing it. So the byproducts of the fentanyl were typical of illicit fentanyl, so not medical grade. And they determined it had been orally ingested. Yikes. Forensic analysis of the defendant's cell phone shows that by April 16, 3 days after law enforcement first informed the defendant that Eric Richins died of a fentanyl overdose, the defendant's cell phone was used to access website articles with the following titles, among others: Utah State Prison, Timpanogos Women's Facility, what happens to deleted messages, cause of death usually does not impact life insurance payment. How do police and forensic analysts recover deleted data from phones? And signs of being under federal investigation. It's not the signs on the freeway, girl. Forensic analysis of that same cell phone also shows that by June 6th, the defendant's phone was used to conduct the following internet searches, among others. Can you delete something ever again off an old iPhone? There's a bunch of typos without actually having it. Women Utah prison. Can cops uncover deleted messages? iPhone. Can cops force you to do a lie detector test? If someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the birth certificate as? How long does life insurance companies take to pay? And what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? The weird thing is they didn't find any fentanyl in the house. So like it's obvious somebody else was there and left, right? Because either they were there when the poisoning happened or they poisoned the sandwich and left because they took the drugs with them. There was no trace of fentanyl in the house. So on May 8th, 2023, the defendant was arrested. This was after her book tour, and I think she self-published though, but she was on there. It's in my other video. I'll link the playlist down below. So she was arrested for the murder of her husband and received a copy of the charging document and probable cause statement. Probable cause statement referred to Miss Lauber by her initials and contained many of the facts presented above. On a jail call that day with her mother and brother, the defendant said, Eric Richins asked me to ask Miss Lauber for pain pills. The defendant never mentioned asking for pain pills for Eric Richins or from Miss Lauber during 3 hours of police interviews, and indeed insisted that Eric never took illicit drugs or pain medications other than occasional over-the-counter pain medications. Like a Tylenol, girl, we pretending it was a Tylenol poisoning. The defendant fraudulently claimed insurance benefits from Eric's death. Count 26. Defendant was the beneficiary of 2 insurance policies on Eric Richins' life issued by TruStage with an aggregate death benefit of $350,000, which we talked about that earlier. One of the policies issued on May 12th, 2017, and the other on February 4th, 10 days before her first attempt on his life, 2022, 1 month prior to Eric Richins' death. So she tried to unalive him on the 14th, so that was 10 days before, but then she wasn't successful until the next month, 1 month later. On April 28th, 2022, the defendant submitted a claim against the policies. On June 7th, 2022, TruStage learned that Eric Richins' cause of death was drug intoxication, fentanyl. On June 14th, TruStage left a voicemail with the defendant requesting a copy of any prescription Eric Richins had for fentanyl. Later that same day, the defendant informed TruStage that the fentanyl was not prescribed and that she didn't have any idea how Eric Richins obtained the fentanyl. The next day, June 15th, the defendant reiterated to TruStage that she really did not know where Eric Richins obtained the fentanyl. Then count 26. Pattern of unlawful conduct. The pattern of unlawful conduct is predicated upon the offenses charged in counts 1 through 25 above. And it's a list, honey. It's a list. And the herein uncharged insurance frauds, attempted aggravated murder, and attempted murder offenses. So they added the aggravated murder, right? The February 14th, they have enough information and belief that she was involved, especially because the handyman was talking, as the mom said. What did she say? Spilling. So it's not looking good, sis. It's not looking good. Yeah, so she's going to trial early next year, early 2026. I don't know if these will all be charged in one. I know previously she had multiple charges and they were separating them when she had her prior counsel. So I'll get up to speed on that. But I did want to cover that these came out and what these charges were. It's looking bad. Mortgage fraud, 5 counts. Forgery, 5 counts. Issuing bad checks, 7 counts. Money laundering, 7 counts. Communications about fraud, and then pattern of unlawful activities. She's a bad girl. Bad girl. She's still sitting in jail. She's got the new counsel, which I believe are public defenders. And yeah, it just, wow. Wow. She looks pitiful. I couldn't figure out before when I would look at her, like there was something about her. I think it's not shame though. It's just like pity. Like somehow somebody in all this did her wrong. She should be shamed. What is wrong with you? What was the plan? You're going to kill him? You still weren't managing your money properly. So you would have spent all his estate money, all the boys' money, and still been broke, still been doing dumb shit. Ugh. This trial cannot come fast enough. So we'll be looking more into her and just seeing exactly what type of tomfoolery this Miss Ma'am has been up to. Let me know what you guys think. Did you know all of this before? Like, I had an inkling. I knew there was some hard money loans and some other stuff going on, but not to this extent and not to the best friend. I want to hear from the best friend. If you guys know her name, let me know because I want to look if there's any interviews or depositions for her. I'm going to do some digging. But if you have any information to help point me in a direction, I would greatly appreciate it. Just drop it in the comments below. All right. I will talk to you in the comments below. Talk to you guys later. Toodles.